It's taken me this long to talk to somebody that has been my idol, has been the blueprint for my career. We share a last name. She asked me off mic if we were related. I was like, I was going to ask you. Winner of a couple of Emmys, Peabody Award winner, several books, including this latest, My People, 5 Decades of Writing About Black Lives. Let me welcome the great Charlayne Hunter-Gault. Hi.
Hello, it's so nice to be here with you.
Good to see you.
You're probably my cousin.
We definitely we favor a little bit. I feel
Yeah.
like we favor around the nostrils and definitely the cheeks. I feel like there's some Hunter running through both of us somewhere. Let me introduce you, of course, to Dr. Caretha Mitchell, my co-host for the day. As I'm
Hello.
as we're diving into this book, your journey, I was just like, first of all, where is West South Carolina? Due West, South Carolina. That feels like it's like something out of a novel. Due West, South Carolina.
Well, when I wrote my first book several years ago, I called one of the chapters Due West of What? Because whenever I would say, well, I was born in Due West, people would say, due west of what? So I had to learn to say, well, it's due west of Abbeville and this and that and that and that. And then I spoke one year at Erskine College, which was very nice. That would not have happened when I was growing up. But I'm glad to see that we make some progress, even though we get a little disappointed these days in the lack of progress in some areas. But we've made progress, and I'm happy about that.
I'm looking at your life story as I guess a testament to the progress. University of Georgia, you transferred there, and they didn't have a room for you. They didn't have a room for you. I think about Pauli Murray, all of the great people who wanted to get an education, and these schools never had a room for you. But
Right.
other people they had room for. So you sued. Talk about taking 18 years old saying, you know what, you're going to find room for me. I'm going to take you behind the court. When was that conversation had with yourself?
I didn't have to have that conversation. Fortunately, I had some of the best legal minds in the country: Constance Baker Motley, Donald Hollowell, Vernon Jordan, Horace Ward. And so they were the ones who argued the case. And they knew all of the things that they needed to present that would show that the university had been lying about why both Hamilton Holmes and I were not admitted. And it never had to do with race. It had to do with bullshit. Pardon my French, but it was weird. And Connie Motley was the lead lawyer, and she, one day in the courtroom in Athens while they were hearing the case, somebody said, look at that old fool. She just asked him a question that's going to knock him off his chair, and he didn't even realize what was coming. And that's how good she was. I mean, she was just excellent. And of course, she worked all over the South. And she was very, shall I say, very focused on what she was doing, to the extent that for the longest time, she never even acted like I existed. I mean, she would go in that courtroom and argue the case, and then she'd be tired, and then she'd go and rest. And she never, up until a point, she never actually acknowledged me. And then there came a time when it was the end of December, and I had enrolled at Wayne State University till the case was decided. And so I wanted to get back to Detroit, because that's when the fraternity and sorority parties were, in December, and I was a teenager, right?
Right.
And so eventually, one night, they told us that we couldn't leave because they needed to have us testify again or something like that. And of course, that upset me because I wanted to get back to the parties, and it upset her too. But again, she had never had even a small exchange with me. And then all of a sudden, I'm sitting in the car with my mouth poked out, as only a 19-year-old could do. She gets in the car and starts to take off her shoes because she had some water problem with her feet. And then she turned to me and said, because I was looking bad, and she looked at me and she said, "I know how you feel." I said, "She's acknowledging me?" and she said, "Yeah, I wanted to go back home to New York to my husband and 9-year-old son, but I got to stay here and do my duty." And that just made all the difference to me. I mean, here was someone who, for the most part, was totally focused on the job she had, which was to end segregation in public education, or to continue implementing the 1954 Brown decision. And, you know, when we argue about history these days and what should be taught and what shouldn't, I have found, going around the country and speaking at various places, that so many of us, people of my color and yours and hers, don't know the 1954 Brown decision, what it meant. And that is why I am so enthusiastic about my book. Of course I am. but I'm hoping that it'll give some perspective to our struggle over the years to become full citizens, because that was in our heads. You know, I think that even though I grew up in the segregated South, my parents helped me be a whole person. For example, when I told my mom I wanted to be a journalist like Brenda Starr, I didn't know about Ida B. Wells at the time. I see her over your shoulder. Isn't that Ida B. Wells back then?
That is Ida B. Wells. That's my other inspiration. Yes.
Right. And so, but I told her, I said, when I grow up, I want to be like Brenda Starr. And she didn't say, "Oh no, that's not something, you know, little Black girls can do." My mother said very nonchalantly, because she was a nonchalant kind of person, she said, "If that's what you want to do." And that was enough for me. It wasn't, "You can't do that," the blah, blah, blah. And then eventually I learned about other women, especially journalists like Ida B. Wells. I mean, those things were taught to us in our schools, in the Black schools. And so we weren't just sitting around waiting for white people to tell us what to do. We had our own. I mean, every year, my elementary school, they would have a fundraiser, and the parents would have to raise money to make up for the deficits. We used to get books with hand-me-down books with the pages torn out from the white schools. But they would have this, I would say, fundraiser, and whichever family got the most money, because my mama and grandmama over there counting nickels and dimes and quarters that they had gotten, the son or daughter would be crowned king or queen. And this particular night I heard, and our next queen is Charlayne Hunter. Well, I got a bull of a watch as a result. What? And a diamond tiara. I put that tiara on and my friends began to hate me because I wore it every day until the teasing just got to be too much, and eventually I took it off. But here's what's important about that. The notion that I was a queen took up residence in my head. So when they were yelling the N-word, "Go home," at Georgia, when I first went there in 1961, I was looking around for the N-word because I knew that wasn't me. I was a queen. You know, it's all about how you're brought up and what you're taught by your parents and your teachers and your preachers.
We're talking with Charlayne Hunter-Gault. The book is My People, 5 Decades of Writing About Black Lives. She was talking about Constance Baker Motley, who was the inspiration to Ketanji Brown Jackson. She was her idol, and that inspired her. To go to University of Georgia, I always think about coming from a place where people see you, love you, know you, inspire you, give you no limits. Why even want to go into a place where they would call you the N-word? And I think this is a question for many today, as folk are, we're looking at affirmative action being overturned, particularly in colleges. HBCU enrollment is up, for a lot of reasons. You talked about Wayne State. When we come among our people, there is a sense of community. Why did you want to go to the University of Georgia?
Well, we were approached by a group of activist Black men in Atlanta, one of whom was Carl Holman, who's transitioned now. He's in the land that is fairer than gold, or whatever they say. And he and several of the activist Black men felt that it had been long enough, almost too long, to get the Brown decision implemented in Georgia. So they came to our high school and asked the principal if he could give them a couple of top students. And they sent for Hamilton and me, because we were the top two in the class. And we said, sure, why not? We'll try it. So we go downtown to Georgia State College. And Hamilton, I have to give him credit, although I didn't often give him credit. We were competitors in so many ways, but we loved one another. Anyway, he looked at the curriculum and he said, this isn't it. He said, I want to go. And he went out on the porch, the deck of the institution, and pointed north and said, I want to go there. And of course, I'm not going to let him get ahead of me. So I said, yeah, me too. And that's how it started. Now, the men, all Black, were concerned because they didn't know anybody in Athens, and they didn't know anybody along those roads that had Ku Klux Klan and other anti-Black people, who did bad things to Black people. But they said, if these two kids, young people, kids, I guess they said, want to do it, we have to get behind them. And that's how it started. And so the thing was that for Hamilton, it was a place where he could study pre-med, because he wanted to be a doctor. His grandfather was a doctor. So he could study that pre-med there, had a really great school in that department. And then they had a great journalism school. And so that was what I wanted. And I don't think I ever focused. I have to go back and think about this, but I was so bent on getting the job done, I guess you could put it that way, or getting my degree, you can put it that way. None of that ever bothered me. Even the night that the students rioted outside my dorm and they threw rocks through the window, and somebody, the dean came to say that I was being suspended for my own safety. Now, they had taken their time to get rid of the crowd, and there was a lot of tear gas and stuff out there. So they got us, well, Hamilton didn't have to live on campus. So in those days, the girls had to live on campus. They were protected in so many ways. So anyway, we go to Hamp, and I had to jump up and down and scream because his grandfather had given him a car, and he wanted to drive that car home. Well, I did not think that was a good idea, given all of the anti-Black people who lived along the way. So I know that he used to get upset when I act silly. So I started acting silly. I started jumping up and down saying, he said, okay. So we get in the car, they whisk us to Atlanta. The next day, the journalists come to our house, the reporters, and they say, well, how scary, wasn't that scary when you had to go out into that dark night? And, I don't know, I suspect that I'm a PK, a preacher's kid. And I grew up being educated in the church by my grandparents and my mom and all of them. And my mom used to send me to Florida every summer to get some of that old time religion, because my grandfather was the preacher, presiding elder, and my grandmother was the saint. And she made me learn a Bible verse every day. And it hadn't occurred to me until I was asked that question. How did you get through that dark night and not knowing who was out there? And it just tells you what is inside your soul. You don't ever know. But I said, without missing a beat, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me all the days of my life. And that had to have been in my head. I mean, we got to train up children in the way they should go. And when they're old, they will not depart from you. I mean, I go to church sometimes. I go every Sunday to Otis Moss III online.
Yeah, I like Radio Baptist myself. We're talking with Charlayne Hunter-Gault. While you were at the University of Georgia, and this was stunning to me, you met your first husband and got married. You got married. And it was illegal in this country for you to get married. It was illegal in Georgia for you two to be married. And you got married. And you talked about how you loved him, but you deprived him of being able to do a simple thing like go to the movies with you, go to a particular restaurant, because you could not enter. You could not sit in this restaurant. You could not sit in the front of a theater. So he had to forfeit all of that because he didn't have melanin.
Right.
And it was illegal to marry Black and white in that time in Georgia. Talk about that.
Well, you know, we have a daughter who's an artist. Check out her work.
Suzanne
Gallery. I don't know if she's still doing it, the website right now. She's working on it. But, you know, I had a handful of really nice friends at UGA, including some journalists. I mean, Calvin Trillin was always around. You know, he was working for Time Magazine, but one night he called me in my room. I went out, the phone was in the hall, and I said, hello. He said, Charlayne, it's Bud. Now, Bud is from New York, right? And Jewish. So he said, how'd you like a hot pastrami sandwich right about now? So, you know, I developed relationships with all kinds of people, especially the journalists and those who were role models for me. And Bud Trillin, as well as Walter Stovall, were in my corner, and there was never any question about it. And people don't seem to understand how lonely it could have been if I hadn't had friends like Walter and Marsha Powell, and there were a bunch of Jewish girls who, you know, I was on the first floor, nobody else on the first floor. They made my room out of the student government rooms, 2 rooms. And one day they knocked on the door and I opened it, and there were these several girls with bags of groceries, because I had 2 rooms. I had a shower, which the students upstairs were upset about because they had to all shower in the same place. But I had a private shower and a tub and a kitchenette. And they said, we've come to cook dinner for you. And I said, oh, really? And they came in and they began to tell me something that I didn't know, which was that they were descendants of the Holocaust survivors. And growing up in Georgia, I knew Black and I knew white. I didn't know Jewish.
Yeah.
But as a result of that night, I learned a history that is important to know. How we share many of the same things even in this country, which, you know, has not had its, let's see, how shall I put this? It hasn't always had great moments, but on the other hand, it has had some good moments. And I think one of them was the team that got us into UGA. I've never regretted it. I was there the other night doing a talk honoring John Lewis, who was getting posthumously awarded the Georgia Writers Hall of Fame. And that was just wonderful to be there doing that. Yeah, so the university's come a long way. It's got a ways to go, but that's the point. It's like the voting. We have to work on this. We can't just sit back and say, oh, okay, I guess it's going to happen. No, we got to be active one way or the other. Journalists have to be very careful because we're not activists in so many ways.
We are now, unfortunately. I don't
Well,
think there is journalism anymore. I think journalists want to be stars, and they want to be seen. When you were coming up, and then I was coming up, you weren't the story. You disseminated the story. You brought the story. You weren't the story. I don't see that today. I don't know what you see.
well, I have some very well-educated friends who more than once have said they don't watch the news anymore. They don't read the newspapers. It's just too much. Now, I don't happen to agree with that, but there's some papers, one that I used to work for, the pieces, I can understand how people would get a little frustrated because the pieces are so long. And I just find it interesting that at a time when people's attention spans are so much shorter than they've ever been, this New York Times is making wider and longer pieces. And I don't know. I hope the New York Times continues its role of informing people. I'm just concerned about who's going to read those very long pieces. As I said, I've talked to several of my well-educated friends who say they don't watch it anymore. They don't watch television anymore. They don't watch the news. So if you look at this election and you know that there are people who don't watch the news, you say, well, how are they voting? How are they being informed? So I guess that's you to pursue.
We know how. 1968, Charlayne Hunter-Gault joined the New York Times as a metropolitan reporter, specializing in covering the urban Black community. She joined the McNair-Lehrer Report, as a correspondent in 78. She became the NewsHour's national correspondent in 83. And then you worked in Johannesburg, South Africa, as a National Public Radio's chief correspondent in Africa in the 90s. So this is who you are. You're a journalist. 866-801-8255.
Thank you.
So I just have to break in here because I am so excited to talk to you. And I have to say that the way that you answered Karen's question about wanting to go to the University of Georgia despite the hostility, and the way that you were focused on getting the job done regardless of the hostility, I have to admit that very much you described what I call homemade citizenship, a deep sense of success and belonging in the midst of violence. That is how I see the history of this country, from slave cabins literally to the White House. So it's exciting to hear you speak in those same terms about marching towards success and knowing that white violence just responds to your march towards success.
Right, thank you.
I also want to ask you though, because I'm so interested kind of in what Karen put on the table too about the state of journalism. And your focus has really been about representing Black communities in ways that they are recognizable to themselves. And what I was hoping you would talk to us a little bit about is, how do you see the fact that there is, to your point, so much people who aren't going to the newspapers, but in addition to that, so much in terms of social media? What are some of the things that you're telling younger journalists as you speak in different places and share your book with different people? How do you talk to younger journalists about moving forward in ways that represent communities in ways that are recognizable to them, at the same time that they're being bombarded with disinformation?
Well, what we're seeing today is an increasing amount of different media, and I just think that we need to spend time with our younger journalists, which is why I'm here today. You don't need me, but
No, I need you always.
and talk to them about their role, because in two things have not changed. One, Jim Lehrer, my colleague at the NewsHour years ago, used to say, if you give people good information, they will do the right thing. And then years before that, what was his name? Used to say, what was that? He used to say, this instrument can teach, it can illuminate. He's talking about television. It can inspire, but it can only do so to the extent that human beings are willing to use it to those ends. Otherwise, it's merely lights and wires in a box. And I have to think of, oh gosh, I can't think of his name right now, but anyway, I'll figure it out in a minute. I got too much on my mind this morning.
So
yeah, I think those are truths that are still applicable today. If you give people good information, now you got to figure out how to do that. And Twitter is not how you do it. And so I think that whenever you're invited to come to a school, to talk to kids, young people, those are the invitations I accept before any others, because I really do think that our young people are not being educated about our history. Well, in some cases they are, but several years ago, the Southern Poverty Law Center said that 85% of the schools in this country don't teach Black history.
mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's something we got to get our arms around.
So part of what I'm thinking about as I listen to you, first of all, the fact that you are open to those invitations and offering that guidance is such a gift to the whole community, because this entire nation has democracy in the balance. And so the fact that you're doing that in different pockets is really making a difference. But the other thing that this conversation makes me think about as a literary scholar is the way that autobiography can be a form of solidarity. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you've taken the time to write this book and make that available to people who won't be able to be in those rooms feels to me like another way that you are making sure that there's some solidarity that people can pick up from and model for themselves and their communities as well. So thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you. That's a beautiful statement. And I will write it down and show it to myself every morning.